And then Mr. Baloy wanted to know who held the view that there were no intruders. This is when Mr. Gininda said it was Mr. Makubo and Buthelezi. I admit that at one point I thought there were no intruders myself, but I looked into the docket a little bit closer. Looking at certain facts, I was then certain that there were no intruders. All right? This is what Gininda is saying. And he says, then they took a turn. This investigation or investigators, there was a turn that happened where now Officer Makubo as well as Buthelezi went their separate ways from the lead investigations or the investigating team led by Gininda. Why? Because a different view came out. So meaning now, Mr. Gininda ended up saying, no. After looking even closer, I decided no, there actually were intruders. And then Makubo and Buthelezi continued to say no, there were never intruders. Then Buthelezi and them, next thing we heard there was a second docket, 375. Basically, 375 was born without Gininda knowing about it. He just heard about it, he says. And then he says, I know nothing about 375. After hearing about it, I found out that it suspected the people in the house. 375 suspected the people in the house. But I thought he said earlier, anyways, because he said no, it was about defeating, not about deleting Senzo. But now he's saying it was about the people in the house. And then Mr. What's his name? Baloy said, who opened this docket? And Mr. Guinness said it was Warrant Officer Makubo and Buthelezi. I did not have sight of this docket. The first time I saw it, it was at the DPP's office, which is the leader of the National Prosecuting Authority. I'm supposing it is Batohi. On the 29th of January 2020, the second time was when the court ordered it be disclosed to the defense. I then got the copy. After September or October, around there is when I got 375. I saw the docket because of the differences of views. Then Police Commissioner Brigadier Peruman was appointed by the then National Police Commissioner to analyze the docket 636. It was because there were no suitable environment between us and the other team. So meaning that there was an argument or a fight between Gininda and Officer Warrant Makubo and Buthelezi. Brigadier Peruman was from Eastern Cape Commercial Crimes Unit at the time, and now apparently he's a brigadier or something like that. And he worked with another police officer by Colonel Lutz. And then he continues to say, I was then asked to make copies and give them, giving the new guys that were appointed by the police commissioner, which is Peruman and Lutz. The 375 docket was already open, but it did not successfully get to the hands of the new team, which is Peruman and Lutz, because Officer Makubo as well as Buthelezi had refused. That means they met resistance, he says, regarding handing over that docket. I think there was already a conspiracy theory that Makubo as well as Buthelezi had put together about the police, that if they handed over this, they were going to destroy it. I think that's the suspicion they had. That's why they resisted. They suspected the police. The police suspected the police. After analyzing the docket, they then met with the police commissioner, and no one knew who were the suspects at the time. I didn't know who the suspects at the time, he says. They were of the view that they were intruders. Now, Peruman as well as Lutz, after analyzing the docket, them two decided or came to the conclusion that they were indeed intruders. Ngomezulu stood up and said, I'm not sure if we were finished with that view. I think by Peruman as well as Lutz. But Baloy blue-ticked Mr. Ngomezulu, who sat down and didn't say anything after that. Gininda then continued to say, I then arranged a meeting with the prosecutors that then met with the with the DPP. On the 29th of January 2020, we then met with the prosecution team of the MPA, which was Advocate Leonard, Advocate Makweta, and Advocate Baloy, the current prosecutor. The very Baloy we all know and probably love. Then he continues to say that two members, Makubo and Buthelezi, they arrived there while they were having a meeting with the DPP. And unfortunately, that meeting had to disperse because Brigadier Peruman had an issue with the two just barging in without following proper protocols. And so they had to leave, and they left with that docket 375 from what he is saying. DPP was then they continued the meeting, and then they came up with a way forward about these investigations, how these investigations should be conducted, etc., and so on. And then he continues to say, that is my recollection of what happened on the 29th of January 2020. And then Mr. Baloy continued to ask, upon assessment of the docket, your docket 636, you came to the conclusion that there were intruders. However, since everyone kept talking about... Okay, let's do this one again. I'm so sorry. I just mixed up everything. Mr. Baloy said, upon assessment of the docket, what did you find? And then Mr. Gininda continues, said, upon assessment of my the docket 636, I came to the conclusion there were intruders. However, since everyone kept talking about the possible shooter being Longwe Twala, I too thought it may be him. But I looked at it even closer. The prelim report, it was alleging that a cell phone belonging to Kelly Kumalo was stolen by the intruders. And then he continues to say, two cell phones were disclosed. One was stolen by the intruders. I looked at the cell phone records from section 205 that was applied for by the initial investigating team. I established that you could place all cell phones under one tower at the Kumalo house. After the shooting, all who were in the house, their cell phones pinged at the hospital tower. However, the stolen cell phone, which starts with 072, it took a different direction, pinging at Maluleki. It's possible that it may have been the intruder because everyone and their cell phones were accounted for by the hospital tower. And then in my head, I'm like, but you're not talking about the red polo, sir. The red polo was moving up and down. Only around past 9, it went to the hospital and came back to the Kumalo house. So is it possible that it was in the red polo? It's my question. Is it possible? I think it's possible. They need to look into the movement of that particular cell phone. And then he continues to say, where does it say? Yeah. And then he says, this is when I realized that there is a problem, meaning dispelling the view that there were no intruders. But then again, that cell phone could have been taken by anybody. Anybody. But how do you know it was the intruder or intruders? And then Mr. Baloy continues to say, Vodacom testified in this court by Pinky, looking into her affidavit 205 of a specific number, reference GPRS of a specific number. And then Gininda reads the number starting with 072, but he cannot see clearly what the number was. And so he asked if he could look into his cell phone. And the judge wanted to know if the number is not clear. He said, no, it's not, using a big word in court there. And so Mr. Baloy was like, okay, let's look into Colonel Stain's, records. And that's when it was abstracted from. And then he read the number out. And the number belonged to Kelly Kumalo, the one of the stolen cell phone that took a different direction, instead also being found where? At the hospital tower. It's the second phone that I was able to establish that there were actually intruders. I mean, that cell phone, anything could have happened. Just like their explanation about the cell phones of the accused that Vodacom read. Like, well, the cell phone can be used by anybody. So same thing here, right? Anyways, that is what transpired thus far, and we are on short adjournment, and then I think now we're left with probably 3 minutes. Hopefully, this video you will get to consume it. Those of you that are working can do so. I'll see you guys a little bit later. Goodbye.